Raise some
Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.
Welcome to Raising Cain, the show that pulls no punches and digs into the stories that shape our world. Today, we've got a powerhouse guest joining us, Casey Whalen, an investigative journalist and videographer from Coeur, Idaho. For the past 6 years, Casey has been on a mission exposing the ideological infiltration creeping into our schools and communities, from Marxist agendas in classrooms to shadowy ties between nonprofits and government programs. His work has been a wake-up call for Idahoans, fighting to protect their values. We'll be right back after a short break to dive into all of this with Casey himself. So stay tuned. This is going to raise some Cain.
It says, I woke up this morning and looked out the door to a country I don't recognize. They put masks on our face to hide our pain, and there's no fire in most people's eyes. And it's still true today. It's still true today that they've tried to destroy the American spirit. And in some instances, they've done a dadgum good job. But in other instances, they have lit an inferno in some people. And we right now are gathering some of those people that are on freaking fire to save this country.
Increasing expenses have caused us all a lot of pressure these days, and it's affecting even the wealthiest of people. Most have lost their sense of security, stability, and even hope for a strong financial future. The game plan of everyone in your cell phone has likely been disrupted or even hardcore stopped, and most are looking for a creative solution to regain financial momentum. Oftentimes, life's best solutions are the simplest. But first, a question. What is something most people think they should own but don't? Crypto, fine art, real estate? Nope. We are talking about real money. The kind kings and queens fought for and large institutions today buy in mass. We're talking about gold and silver, assets that provide confidence in tough financial situations. So the question is, do you own any? If you don't, you're not alone. Most people aren't maximizing the power of precious metals because it's just been too complicated. And even though they see advertisements about gold and silver daily, they don't really know who to trust. That is, until now. The bottom line is that buying gold and silver doesn't have to be complicated or scary. There's a simple, better way to accumulate assets and create financial peace, headache-free. And this very minute, a new community of average people are seeing above-average results to the tune of tens of millions in assets over the last few years. This system is tested, it's simple, and it's not an experiment. To date, it's helped more than 80,000 people bring hope back into their lives. It's invitation only. And right now, this new community has accepted a challenge to give away as much free gold this year as possible. Curious? Learn how to get your free gold today. Check out the next step to get the details.
Welcome to Shop with America, where the emphasis is on America. Our movement is to switch away from your shopping with the big box stores and the mega corporations back to supporting family-owned, made in America. We've been giving these big box stores our money every day for years. But what's happened is they've forced many small businesses to shut down. We call this the illusion of choice. We see all these products in these stores, but in reality, it's only a few companies that control it all. There are thousands of lawsuits for health damage because they put profit over our people. But there is another choice. We found a better way. There's a family-owned American factory with product integrity and have always done things the right way for the right reasons. And this company outperforms the big box stores. That's due to their month-to-month shopping club. They make everyday consumer products that we all use and buy again and again, like toothpaste, shampoo, coffee, and organic beef. Go to shopwithamerica.us today.
Welcome back to the Raising Cain Show. We're here live with Casey Whalen, the investigative journalist and videographer who has been shaking things up in Coeur d'Alene. Am I saying that properly?
It's Coeur d'Alene.
Coeur d'Alene. Okay, there we go. Idaho and beyond. Over the last 6 years, Casey has uncovered Marxist influences in education, exposed controversial programs like the EHS Upstander Action Plan, and revealed troubling connections between Idaho nonprofits and initiatives like the DOJ's United Against Hate. His relentless pursuit of the truth has empowered parents and citizens to stand against ideological overreach. Casey, great to have you with us. Let's get right into it and raise some Cain.
Thank you so much for having me on your platform today, Nate. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, Casey, your work has made waves in Idaho and beyond. Can you share what initially sparked your passion for investigating educational issues in your state?
Well, I guess it was attending in 2019, there was a drag queen story hour at the South Hill Library on June 15th, 2019. There was a one the following week also at the downtown library on the 22nd of June. And so I went to the one on the 15th, and I was just going there to try to capture both sides of the issue. I had been, prior to that, I'd been what's called a First Amendment auditor. And that's where you film police. You're just making sure your rights are upheld. And I did that for a while, and that it had kind of had its place where you can be right in a lot of cases as far as your rights are concerned. But that kind of ran its course, and I decided I wanted to shift to becoming more of a journalist because that's way more effective in just putting out the truth and letting people decide for themselves. So I went to this drag queen story hour at this library, the South Hill Library, excuse me. And so it was very interesting. I tried to be neutral, but at the end of the day, they had cordoned off the entire side of the South Hill Library with yellow caution tape. And they were asking people, because I got all 30 plus hours of the body camera footage from that event. And the Spokane police were asking people as they're walking down the sidewalk, which side are they on? And a lot of people were just saying, I'm just walking down the sidewalk. So a lot of discriminatory type things. A pastor named Pastor Afshin Yakdin, who's originally from Iran, was arrested. He became a really good friend of mine. At that event, he was arrested for simply trying to go into the library because they just did not want people to see what was going on at that library that day. So I decided at that point I had to get into this cultural war that was occurring. And since then, I have been, I've learned to do videography. That's a whole other topic. Public records requests, and really become just a gumshoe investigative journalist. Just finding threads and pulling on them with, records requests or contacts in the community. And it's been extremely fruitious. And Coeur d'Alene, Idaho has some wonderful independent journalists, independent reporters doing their own thing with their own platform. And over the last 5 years, it's completely transformed the alt media world, I would say there. And it's allowed me to go and do other things and embed in other communities and help other people. So it's been a lot of fun, honestly.
So tell me more about this pastor getting arrested. What justification did they possibly have? Like, did they charge him with something, or?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the exact charge. I'm not sure if it was disorderly conduct or maybe resisting and obstructing. I think it was R&O, resisting and obstructing. So they actually arrested him. He was just trying to go into the library. I was able to go into the library. I had 2 cameras on me, a press badge. I made up press badge because you don't really need a press badge, to be an accredited.
Last time I checked, this was America.
Everybody's a journalist, right? Everybody can disseminate information to the public.
Today's day, that's absolutely true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually was kicked across the street along with Bill Jasper, the senior editor of the New American Magazine, who's a friend of mine. He was kicked across the street, not allowed to be on the library grounds. And the only reason I was allowed to go back onto the library grounds was because I cited the Washington State Constitution. I believe it's Article 1, Section 5. I might be getting that wrong, but freedom of speech. And I cited that to this officer, and after about 20 minutes, they let me go back over to the other side to document the Drag Queen Story Hour. But they were being very protective of this room where they were having this story hour, and there was a sign up actually that I captured that said there's no photography allowed. And in this picture I took of that picture in that room, you can see a photographer in there for the lamestream media taking a picture of the Drag Queen Story Hour with these kids. And so
Wow.
Pastor Afshin Yaktin had to go through some court cases, and he was represented by the Pacific Justice Institute, and they did a really good job defending him, and they eventually did drop the charges, but it took a long time.
Wow. It blows my mind just how authoritarian things had become in our country. And I mean, I see this everywhere. It's like Trump having to pardon, people who were simply praying on a street side, out in front of abortion clinics. You had just all kinds of crazy things that have happened during the Biden years. I mean, it's honestly, I think it's probably got to be one of the probably the biggest reflections on tyranny, I think, in my lifetime that I've ever seen. Now, you also interviewed with Sheila, is it Bucher?
Sheila Bucher.
Sheila Bucher, and you detailed her daughter Anne's troubling experience with transgender indoctrination at Lakes Middle School. How did this situation unfold, and what red flags should parents be on the lookout in their own schools?
Yeah, so I met Sheila. She reached out, or somebody let me know about Sheila's story actually last year. And I'm a contributor to multiple media outlets, and one of them is the Idaho Tribune.org. And so we did a interview with Sheila, and she explained the story of her daughter, who we're calling Anne in the story. And she enrolled her in 6th grade at Lakes Middle School, which is part of the Coeur d'Alene School District number 271. And this was, I believe, a little bit over a year ago, a little bit over a year ago now. Sheila had raised her daughter at a private Christian school that Sheila taught kindergarten at. And that school could no longer teach her they couldn't teach her 6th grade math. So she had to enroll her, she felt, at Lakes Middle School. Well, within a week of her enrollment at that school, she thought she was a boy named Felix, a cat. And long story short, she ended up cutting herself, mutilating herself multiple times, tried to commit suicide up to 7 times, and is getting treatment and is doing well, or better, I should say. I was trying to get Sheila on with me today, but she's just having a hard time right now. So she's been dealing with this with her daughter for a while, where she's almost tried to commit suicide.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Just by cutting herself. So it's really tragic. So those types of stories really are our emphasis of why I'm doing this, or why I'm so passionate about this. And luckily my son is no longer in school, and kind of dodged a lot of this, but I just think of the younger kids, and it's heartbreaking to think of this psychological manipulation that's occurring in these
Yeah,
schools.
I mean,
And so we
it's
have to do something about
tantamount
it.
to child abuse. And I really don't understand how these schools are getting away with this sort of thing. Honestly, these teachers need to be held accountable that are pushing this kind of nonsense in these classes. We send our children to school to get an education in academics, not to get indoctrinated, into some warped, worldview.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's why it's right now so important with what's transpiring right now with President Trump being in office again. And then on January 23rd, he passed, I believe, he got rid of an executive order that Obama had passed implementing DEI in the Department of Education. And with this new executive order, he got rid of that. He basically abolished DEI, this DEI facilitation within the Department of Education. And then also the Department of Education has since been sending out letters called Dear Colleague letters to these public education institutes. So that happened on February 14th. And then since I've been in the Boise area, I'm normally from North Idaho, but I'm currently in Southern Idaho, just embedded to just work on some stories. And I happen to be investigating the school districts here in Southern Idaho. This has had a grand rippling effect, I would say, within these school districts, and we can talk more about that. But suffice to say, they're very worried about losing their public funding, their federal funding, and so they're trying to get rid of all DEI type programs. Otherwise, they will lose their federal funding. And so it's a very interesting time to step into the gap and push on that thread, and try to force these school districts to do the right thing.
I'm just like, when I hear this story, it baffles me because, and I'm sure probably most Americans feel this way. I tend to think of Idaho as a very conservative, very, not your typical progressive California or New York, So how did this happen in your state? And do you know the history of like how this ended up becoming this way? Because clearly the majority of people in Idaho, I think, are pretty conservative, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think Idaho's no different really than I think any other state. It just depends on where the power centers are. And so we have North Idaho, where Kootenai County, where Coeur d'Alene is a major power center. And of course, Boise is another one. So throughout the early 80s, I would say there was there was at least one prominent 501c3 nonprofit that sprung up to combat Richard Butler and the KKK movement, or that whole thing that was happening in North Idaho at the time. There were these human rights, quote unquote, nonprofits that sprung up to combat that. And so that was the genesis of kind of what we're dealing with today in North Idaho. But it's really interesting to study that history. But where we are today, now we have a human rights education institute in Boise, and there's one in Coeur d'Alene. And so basically these 501c3s have essentially, I would say, for lack of a better term, manipulated the community into their ideology, where there's people on the Rotary and the Chamber of Commerce and the city council and the mayors, those types of positions, education, medical, where they get people into positions of power that have a liberal mindset, that are controlling what's put out in the media, etc. So it's hard for conservatives to have a foothold in this media war we're going through. So that's one of the reasons why independent journalism is so important right now. I don't know if I exactly answered your question there, but
No, you did. Now, based on your investigations, what role do you think that educational institutions are playing in pushing these specific ideologies onto students, and how widespread is this trend across Idaho?
yeah, so I mean, I think it's everywhere. I mean, I think these school districts, from what I'm seeing now, are starting to crack down on the DEI type of that sort of propagandization in these classrooms now, because they have put out these Dear Colleague letters. I got one through the West Ada School District on March 12th. They sent out a letter to all the teachers letting them know what is appropriate in the classroom, and they stress they just want to be neutral. They don't want it to be distracting, is one of the major key words that they use in that letter. So I guess it depends on where you are, but I think this problem, this Marxist ideology is everywhere. We have teachers that are, I think some of them just mean well, and they think, everyone is welcome here. That sounds great. But when you get down to it and you understand critical theory and how we've been manipulated over the last couple of years, and now actually I've been seeing a great tide, and we'll talk more about that maybe in a little bit, but how these teachers are starting to band together to fight back against banning DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion in schools throughout the state of Idaho. So really, I would say the state of Idaho is really no different than your state likely. It just depends on where the power centers are. And then usually where the power centers are, you have people that are looking or thirsty for power. And like a lot of times, at least in Coeur d'Alene, I know a lot of those power centers are filled by people that align with this Marxist, socialist, liberal ideology. And so it's very hard for conservatives to, like I said, get a foothold in that type of environment.
Well, I know that at least my observation has been that the National Education Association and the Federated Teachers of America, two huge unions that have had, I think, a big role in protecting teachers and pushing this kind of, Marxist ideology, I think, is where a lot of this is coming from. But also, as you mentioned, the DEI that has made it into the administrations of these schools. With them putting in, diversity, equity, inclusion officers and things like that. What baffles me is why, it just seems like this happened, overnight, and nobody realized it until COVID. And then COVID, parents were seeing all of a sudden what was going on because their kids were at home, and they were seeing what was happening in the classroom, what they were being taught. But how long do you think in your investigation of this, how long has this stuff been going on in our country? Like, when did they start really making a headway into the classroom with this kind of teaching?
Well, I remember when I was a kid, I'm sure you do too, in the early 90s when political correctness was being slung around all over the place, right? And I do remember, I shouldn't say that. That's not politically correct. And I think, it's been happening since then, of course, but in the last handful of years, 10 years, or I don't know when to put an exact time on it, but it's been a gradual indoctrination. And now we have, for instance, a teacher at West Ada School District at Lewis and Clark Middle School. Her name is Sarah Inema, and she had been told in January to take down a poster that I guess the school district decided was not appropriate. It just said it was a sign that said "Everyone is welcome here," and it had handprints of different color ethnicities with hearts on the hands. And so she took it down in January, and then she decided to put it back up about 2 weeks ago, maybe now. That was on March 10th is when it was reported in the media. So she put this poster back up in defiance of their policy because the school district's trying to get rid of this DEI stuff in the classrooms and just keep them neutral. It goes viral. We have the media jumping on board on the side of the teacher. I did records requests. Other teachers were siding with this teacher, giving support and saying, "Where do I get that poster?" So they want to defy the policy too. So we have this large group of these virtue signalers, these teachers in the administrative state, doing their thing. It's going to be a common theme, I think, for the next, couple of years while Trump is in office. Every little thing is going to be manipulated and blown up in the media, and we're seeing it reverberate with the Tesla takedown protests too.
Yeah, I think the solution to this problem, at least with the schools, is I think public schools for too long have not had competition, and I think the best way to solve this problem is to make the money follow the kid and allow parents to have a voucher program so they can put their kids in whatever school that they want to put their kids in, and let the market decide. Eventually, you'll see these public schools, if they continue this nonsense, they're going to go out of business. because parents would rather, I think, see their children get an education and get, academically challenged and grow rather than be indoctrinated. And I think that is, to me, that's the only solution to this, because as long as the unions are involved, we're not going, and not as long as you have the universities producing these teachers that are also indoctrinated, we're going to continue to see this. So I think that's part of it. The other issue, though, I think that the federal government's got to do, and this has been a big problem for a long time, it's something I campaigned on and talked about, but why is it that the United States government funds these grants for programs that don't make any sense? I mean, like, you look at it like right now, you've got two biggest industries in our country, I think, that are the most screwed up have got to be education and healthcare. And what do both of those have in common? They have massive subsidies by the U.S. government. And in fact, when you look, and they're not based on market at all. So when you look at like degrees, for example, you can go get a degree in women's studies or ethno studies of some sort, or DEI or whatever, and the federal government would provide a grant and provide student loans backed by the federal government for those programs. Why do they do that? Shouldn't those be private? As far as I'm concerned, they should. And if the government wants to bolster anything, what they should be doing is those decisions should be based on the statistics that are coming out of the National Bureau of Labor and Statistics. So I remember taking my daughter and going online because she wanted to be a lawyer. And I went online and said, well, let's go see what the going rate for lawyers is and see what the statistics are. And what I was shocked to find was that lawyers had the highest rate of unemployed people in the white collar professions. And so I said, maybe that's not a good idea to go down that road. And so for me, I got to ask myself, why in the hell does the federal government fund degrees for things like that when they know that there's no need for it, or fund education in areas that are going to teach people to hate our country? That makes no sense. So that's, to me, there are some things that can be done, but part of it's got to happen at the federal level. Obviously, I think at the state level, until recently, with Trump's decision to basically push back and say, hey, we're going to do away with the Department of Education and send money back to the schools or to the states to decide how to run their schools. I do think that's a wise decision. And then maybe, just maybe, the people in Idaho who tend to be more conservative will decide that they want to see something done differently with their public education. What say you?
Yeah, well, and actually, ironically, since you mentioned that, we did pass a voucher program this last legislative session, just 2 weeks ago, maybe. So that will be a choice for parents in the state. I want to say up to, if I remember hearing correctly, it was up to $5,000, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but so that's a really positive thing. We have a very conservative legislature on the House and the Senate side, I would say, for the most part, and so there's been a lot of really good bills. One of them is getting rid of these pride flags in public buildings and that sort of thing that passed.
They just voted on something like that in Utah just recently, making it illegal to fly those in public places, which I think absolutely. To me, it's if it's a public place, you shouldn't be pushing a specific political narrative, and that's what that is. It's politicized.
Yep, keep it neutral. I mean, and so anyways, we know we've obviously seen over the last handful of years how things have been so politicized with these rainbow-colored crosswalks and like at the city hall here in Boise, there's a pride flag up and that sort of thing. So hopefully those things will be coming down here soon in June when that law goes into effect.
Yeah, we got to get back to, one of the things that drives me nuts is that we've got an opportunity, to unite behind our common allegiance as Americans. I mean, that really is the thing that could unite us all, regardless of what somebody's political views are, regardless of what somebody's religious views are. We have one thing that unites us, and that's that we're all Americans, and we all believe, at least we should all believe in liberty and freedom in the Constitution. Unfortunately, those things aren't being taught anymore in school. They're not teaching the value of the Constitution and the value of freedom. It's a warped history that's being taught with the 1619 Project and things like that, and also with this anti-American imperialism and all that kind of nonsense that they teach. Have you seen that kind of thing being taught in the schools, and is that changing as well?
I can't say firsthand that I've seen that being taught. I mean, we've obviously heard of that and how some of these schools are trying to implement a Hillsdale College type ideology, I would say, for lack of a better term, in their schools. So that's good. And then we had, there's things that are happening, I guess, that maybe have to happen at the legislative session or the legislative level. But in Idaho, this last session, it's a lot of really good bills. I don't, that's really not my world, so I don't pay a lot of attention to that, but there has been some really good things. And so I think that's where we have to focus, I guess, is probably through the legislature to change a lot of things, which is a tall order. It's the pendulum swings, right? Year by year. So,
well,
I think you're right as far as the public, having parents choose where they put their children and that sort of thing, and maybe homeschooling or whatever. That's a good alternative to get away from this stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I want to shift our conversation to another topic related, but the Upstander Action Plan. You uncovered the EHS Upstander Action Plan in the West Ada School District. Can you walk us through its stated goals and what it is?
Yeah, so this was actually kind of hard to find, and it was once I kind of got a bead on it, I was like, oh, I have to have that action plan. So when I first came to Boise, because I like to go and embed in communities basically to do stories, because it's good to be in that place. Then you make contacts, and so I've been doing it for a couple of years now, here and there, throughout Idaho, and it's been a lot of fun, to be quite honest. But I came to Boise and I started doing public records requests, and I thought I'm just going to pick a couple school districts. So I picked the West Ada and the Boise school districts here, and I basically scrape email domains. And all that means is that I'm just asking for a particular email domain through the city, through a school district, or whatever. And then I'm asking for a particular keyword or keywords. And that has to be very unique, because we're trying to not pay money for records requests. So I will scrape domains, and I scrape their domains for keyword Wasmuth, as in the Wasmuth Center, which is the Human Rights Center here in the area. And through the Boise School District, I got 5,000 emails, and they wanted $1,300 for those emails. It's a 3-week duration in January. So I reduced that date range, because that's something you can do through records request, is change the date range or narrow it down, and so it's easier for the custodian to fulfill it. So I changed the date range to just January 20th, which is Martin Luther King Day. And you wouldn't think there would be very many emails, but there were still almost 700 emails through that domain to and from with the keyword Wasmuth, and they wanted $130 for that one. But that gave me enough information to let me know there's a lot of communication going on with these human rights groups, these 501c3s, and these school districts.
That's interesting. That's a very clever technique to figure out who they're talking to and what's going on. What surprises me as a IT professional and cybersecurity is my background. It seems to me like to pull those records, it's not that hard to do. It seems like an excessive fee to charge for 400 emails. I mean, it's basically
so what's funny is
through
the city of Coeur d'Alene, for example, I've done thousands of records requests, so I can tell when I'm getting messed with. And I agree with you. That does seem very high, because through the city of Coeur d'Alene, I will get, maybe almost 1,000 emails. They won't charge me anything, because they can just do a query, right? They can just do like a search. I mean,
it's just a query.
If I had to guess,
it's all digital. It's not like they got to go. They don't have to go open up a file cabinet and start going through paper. I mean, come on, guys. I think their pricing scheme was probably based on the pre-digital era, and they've just kept it because it's a convenient way to basically shut people like yourself down who are asking for digital requests. Well, as far as I'm concerned, somebody needs to sue the school districts over this, because that policy is ridiculous. If it's a digital record, it's nothing for them to pull that. In fact, I would say they should make this stuff available so that anybody can go on and pull it. These are public records.
Yeah, and that's part of the challenge. Is from place to place it varies. You'll get people that are turning around right away. Some people will drag their feet. And so these people probably, it's the Boise School District where I was getting these records from, which are it's very liberal. Rumor has it, and so I'm guessing that's probably why they were trying to charge me so much. But they'll use the excuse they have to redact stuff. Well, I get hundreds of pages of emails from the Coeur d'Alene. The city of Coeur d'Alene, they won't redact anything, so I don't know. It's this game you have to play, and you can't get it worked up about it. It is what it is, but you can sue them, and that is the remedy.
Yeah. And so do you have a like a constitutional attorney or some attorney that's in Idaho that has, stepped up to help you with any of this?
No, I basically filed one pro se. I sued the Kellogg School District, and once they got the lawsuit, which cost $220 to file, they instantly gave me the records requests, and then all records requests I did after that at that point I had no issues with the Kellogg School District again. So it worked, and I didn't follow through on the lawsuit, but I could have. So I do have a template for that. So if people are in Idaho and they need to do that, they can always send me an email. I'll be happy to share the template with them. And my email address is northidahoexposed with a D @protonmail.com.
Well, hey, folks, right now we've got over 900 people that are live watching the show. If you're watching the show and you know of any lawyers out in the Idaho area, make sure and have them see this show, because we need lawyers to step up, especially if you're a conservative lawyer. This is the kind of thing that you should be stepping up and helping your community with, because these kinds of records requests where they get denied and they, basically are using exorbitant fees and things like that to prevent the public from knowing what is going on. That's an area where you can help. And, it would be, I think, well worth your time and investment in order to help stop these schools from doing that sort of thing. Honestly, to me, I see kind of two areas of tackling that, right? You got the federal government, which, still, at least for now, has the Department of Education. They should be mandating, the transparency laws. It should be coming from them. Say, hey, you have to. We give you federal money. Therefore, you must provide these documents to anybody that asks for us, because technically they're receiving federal money. So why doesn't FOIA apply to every district in the country? So that's one thing.
It does. It's just the states are allowed to. Each state has their own, public record request law, and so you just have to, read your particular state law, and then if there's things about it you don't like, I guess you need to take it up with the legislature.
I guess the state legislature in Idaho needs to get with the program. So if any of you guys are watching, this is an issue that needs to be resolved. They should not be able to hide records by charging these exorbitant fees.
Well, in the state of Montana, it's the law there is even more lax. So at least in Idaho, there are some guidelines where they have to reply by a certain date, and in Montana, that's not really necessarily the case. I mean, I think it is a bit loosely, but it's much more laid back. And so, like on the East Coast, there's a Right to Know Act in many states, and that's very, very good. So it just depends on where you're at, and it's up to the citizenry to beefing up those state laws that govern public records request law. And one of the websites I wanted to mention is the NFOIC. That's the National Freedom of Information Coalition group, NFOIC.org, I believe it is. And you can go there and find sample FOIA letters, templates by state that you can just fill in the blank and send it in. But a lot of places to do public records requests have their own online forms now where they suggest that you do that. But it's really, really super easy. And like I said, the one that I use all the time is I just scrape their email domain, all emails to and from email domain for keyword blah and a date range, and I want electronic documents, and that's it. And then once you get those records, you go through those and you do another record request for the threads you find, and it's really quite that easy. But I think people are just too lazy to go through the process, which is unfortunate because it's really fruitious.
Now, you mentioned that you found all these emails that occurred on that day. Going through those emails, were you able to find anything, substantial that would be interesting to bring up?
Well, I actually never did actually get the ones from the Boise school district because they wanted they wanted money for it, and I generally don't have to pay for anything because I'm pretty good at this now. But like with the Boise school district, they were just a little bit egregious about how they charge. So I really didn't. I did get other records from them, but I did get records from the West Ada school district. And after doing an initial search of emails and then a couple more refinements after that, other records requests, I found out that the vice principal and another teacher there were helping facilitate this EHS Upstander action plan, which was talked about in an email about this plan being implemented through the Wasmus Center, which is the local nonprofit human rights institute in Boise. And they had crafted this plan, this Upstander action plan. And just basically really quickly, the plan was, I did get it eventually after somewhat, I asked the vice principal for it, which is outside of their protocol. They got a little upset about that, but they did give it to me after that. And so in that plan, which was not implemented, the school district decided to not implement it because of Trump coming in office and the crackdown on DEI. But it was to, these students were to be basically what are called upstanders. And they would be given like a bracelet that says, EHS is too great for hate or something like that. Candy bars. They had to sign a pledge, actually, that they would be an upstander. They would also have ambassadors to have pizza parties to basically virtue signal. And they did say to crack down on bullying, which is fine, but a lot of it's just a way, a socialist.
Yeah, wasn't it like a snitch program involved?
Right. Yeah.
right.
For the
hey,
most part.
tattle on your fellow students, and and be a monitor of your teachers to make sure that they're in line with our communist values. It reminds me of the student movements in communist China and in Laos and Russia.
And another aspect of this, which is really interesting, is that they had a writing. Like a project and a writing and an art project, which were to center on the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So in this, it doesn't talk anything about the Constitution, but it does talk about them creating art and writing that promotes the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And outside of the Human Rights Education Institute in Coeur d'Alene is a large stone tablet that has the preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so on these websites, which are actually the Institute in Coeur d'Alene and the one in Boise are related. The Wasmus Center is named after, I forget the gentleman's first name, but he was a Catholic priest in Coeur d'Alene that was combating Richard Butler and the KKK. And anyways, but I wanted to read there's 7 terms that are mentioned in the Constitution, but are not mentioned in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And those terms are, or words are, petition, probable cause, trial by jury, due process, unreasonable searches, excessive bail, and free state. So essentially what I'm trying to say is that these human rights institutions are an arm of Agenda 2030 or Agenda 21. They are the social arm of that. The social, the Agenda 21 is social, economic, and environmental control of your life. And so that's what these institutions are. And so that explains why they're so embedded in trying to propagate this mindset within these school districts.
The American people, and particularly parents, should demand that the schools have nothing to do with the UN. Remember, the UN just recently, they passed a rule that basically they want to include in those human rights is the right for minors to be able to have sex with adults. This was just, I think, last year they passed that. So what's going on with the UN, quite honestly, is an abomination. I would personally prefer to see the United States kick the UN out of our country because it just provides a free pass for all of these commies around the world to come here and then they get to commit crimes and get away with it because of diplomatic immunity. It's not only that, but it becomes a place for them to come, excuse for them to get their spies here, for our adversaries. I remember seeing a sign years ago. I was working, actually back then, I was working in Virginia and Northern Virginia. And there was a farmer that had this huge sign that said, get the U.S. or said, get the UN out of the U.S. And I looked at that sign and go, wait a minute. I thought, shouldn't it say, get the U.S. out of the UN? But no, the UN is here in New York. And so that is one of the things I'd like to see happen is see them, leave our country and dismantle it. To me, it's no different than the League of Nations, but in some ways worse. Let's not forget that the WHO, was one of the key players in helping to propagate COVID lies and censor, the story and what was actually going on and where it had actually come from. So I don't trust the UN at all. And certainly pushing their version of the human rights does not align with American values. When Thomas Jefferson was writing the Bill of Rights into our Constitution, they made it a point, our founders made it a point to express what they called negative rights, not positive rights. That's why they're all geared around saying what the government cannot do, not about what the government has to do. And because it's not about, the government's there to basically protect our rights, and that's it. They don't give us those rights. Those rights come to us from God. And anything that they start pushing, like universal income and crap like that, that's all a bunch of socialist jargon is what it is.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's why these human rights groups are contacting these school districts so much, because they're implementing this ideology. It's a soft hand approach for them to implement, the UN ideology. So, but of course, then we had the John Birch Society throughout the 60s, et cetera, and on promoting that whole get the U.S. out of the UN. So, and then you have like the American Policy Center, which is run by Tom DeWeese, really a great guy. He's been working for a long time to expose this topic. So, but unfortunately, we're so late in the game now. I've seen it happen in my own community where these agendas have already been implemented at a county and in a city level through building codes, et cetera. So, I mean, we're in the thick of that land now. So I don't know how we get out of it, but I think a good start would be to get rid of these 501c3 nonprofits at a state level through the state law.
Yeah. Now, what have you seen in terms of like the Wasmuth Human Rights Institute? Have they, is there policy that is being created at their behest?
Yeah, I think they I know like a lot of these groups, for instance, like they're just in Coeur d'Alene, for instance, we have the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations. That was one of the first groups that was founded. Then they created the human rights. There's a Human Rights Education Institute in Coeur d'Alene, and then they created the one in Boise. But they're all in contact with like the Southern Poverty Law Center, the Western States Center out of Portland, Oregon, the Montana Human Rights Network, which is now known as Catalyst Montana, and all these other smaller satellite groups, on and on. ADL, B'nai B'rith, wow. They're all working. They all have different flavors or tax. They're all 501c3s, largely.
So they're lobbying basically the school for their
I mean, there's 501c3s, there's 501c4s. For instance, the Western States Center and the Montana Human Rights Network have 501c3s and 501c4s, so they're influencing both aspects of that, as politically and at a community level. And so it's just people just aren't really aware of it. So that's what I've been focusing on. And when you find out they're really all working together. There's another group called the IREHR, which is the Institute for Research, Education, on Human Rights, and they do more articles. And then there's all these different groups that have, like I said, a different flavor, but they all really are working together, and they get into the community, like the Chamber of Commerce, Rotary, et cetera, get their people in positions of power on these boards, and then they just flex their muscle and they get the media to pick up their narrative. And so that's why it's really interesting right now to see this teacher that put this poster up in her classroom, caused a big uproar I got her emails actually for 10 days, all of her emails to and from. You can just ask. I just asked for all of her emails. That's really all I did for a record request. Really simple. They gave me 600 emails. I read them. And most of those emails were teachers within the West Ada School District and the Boise School District giving their support to this teacher, saying they want to hang the same poster up. They want to basically oppose the school district's policies because they're virtue signalers. They want to let people know that everyone's welcome here. So we're in a lot of trouble right now. I think there's going to be some pushback across the nation. A lot of teachers, I think, pushing back against this. But yeah, homeschool your kids.
Yeah, what you're talking about is so important, folks. Those of you listening right now, you need to be writing down these steps. Going and using records requests, public records requests to find out what the all of the different 501c3s. Now, let me ask you something. This is something that it's interesting. You mentioned SPLC, right? They are known for keeping lists of conservative groups, right? When I was working at the FBI, I became an FBI whistleblower, blowing the whistle on their cover-up of Hillary Clinton's crimes. But I also was involved in bringing forward information to the IG related to Southern Poverty Law Center, because they were taking marching orders from SPLC in helping to determine homegrown violent extremist groups. And they were labeling groups like Christian organizations or Catholic groups as violent homegrown extremists, even though they had no violence or history of violence. But they were redefining the word violence as anybody that said anything negative about homosexuals or about LGBTQ or anything like that. And so because of that, this one organization that was a Catholic group that practiced conversion therapy, which is voluntary, people that wanted, to go and go through that therapy, they were considering that a homegrown violent extremist group. So I brought this to the attention of the IG. And so to think that group is involved with the schools is horrifying, because they are a completely off the rails, progressive, anti-freedom, anti-everything that we hold sacred in America type of group. Now, the one thing that they do, though, we should take a book from their page, which is they keep a list and they make it public. We should keep a list of every single one of these groups and what they're, they have this type of agenda, this Marxist agenda, and it should be a website that every parent can go to so that they know what groups that, and it should have a list of like where they have chapters, what states they have chapters in.
Well, I know Trevor Loudon has that. It's called Key Wiki.
Oh, nice.
Where you can look up all these radical groups.
What is that? One,
Key Wiki, just like it sounds, I think.
Key Wiki. I'm going to put that in the chat.
Yeah, check that out. He lists a lot of those outlets. Another author, which is really good. He was a major researcher. He just passed away last year. His name is Laird Wilcox, Laird Wilcox, just like it sounds. He's got like some really good. I can send you an ebook actually. Really good stuff.
That'd be great.
He researched a lot of these groups, but
because I think part of the problem is yeah, sure, some of it is laziness, but I think part of it is that parents just don't know. They don't know where to go. They don't know how to research this stuff. They don't know. What to do. I mean, like, honestly, for somebody who cares about their kids, if I had my kids in public school, I'd be paying to get whatever I needed to get, and I'd be suing if I had to get that information. It's probably easier too for a parent, I would imagine, who has kids in that school district, because they really don't have any excuse for keeping that information from you as a parent, right? So
yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to mention really quickly too. I mean, there's not much time left, but you did basically allude to this program that's already underway by the DOJ, the Department of Justice, called United Against Hate. And so that's a program that was launched by AG Merrick Garland in 2022 on September 15th at the White House in a program called United We Stand. And he implored all 94 U.S. district attorneys' offices across the country to participate in this program, United Against Hate, to implore the community to report people in their community, like I said, to report hate incidents and hate crimes to the DOJ and the FBI. So that's been going on since 2022. It's happening in your community. These 501c3 nonprofits, especially the human rights groups that I follow in my community, have already reported a Catholic Rosary walk to the FBI and the DOJ, or implored the law enforcement to report them, and they did. I have the emails. I have a internal flyer from the Coeur d'Alene Police Department talking about a Catholic Rosary walk that's going to happen the same day as a Pride in the Park event on July 11th, 2022. That's a whole other topic, but there is a federal program where these law enforcement institutions are working directly with these human rights networks, and these human rights networks are using it to report their political opposition. And people can go to my Substack and get more information about that, which is
folks,
Casey Whalen.
that is something that we've got to reach out to DOJ, to any connection you have with your congressman. That's got to stop. Especially, we've got a new sheriff in town, and that needs to be put to bed. That program's got to end.
Yeah, they're keeping lists, is what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, you pointed out another thing I want to talk about real quick here. You pointed out how the arrest of Patriot Front members was exploited by North Idaho Pride Alliance to secure security grants for nonprofits. Now, this is particularly disturbing to me because I'm pretty dang sure that Patriot Front is actually the FBI. It's some of these guys aren't those the guys that go around, wearing the blue shirts and the khaki pants and the baklava and hats. I mean, these guys look like FBI agents from my experience at the Bureau.
I mean, I met a handful of them. I followed the trial in Coeur d'Alene. I interviewed one of them, the oldest one that was arrested, James M. Johnson. Honestly, my takeaway is I still haven't seen proof of that, and yeah, it's weird. They don't know where they're going when they go to these larger protests. That came out in court. They find out as they get closer to these events. But yeah, the North Idaho Pride Alliance, which put on the Pride in the Park event every year, downtown Coeur d'Alene, they use the rest of the Patriot Front members to get this nonprofit security grant, and I found out about that through the Coeur d'Alene Police Department. So I scraped the email domain of the police department for the Pride Alliance, one of the members, and I got this nonprofit security grant. And they also referenced an outlet that I contribute to, the Idaho Tribune, as a reason they should get this funding, because we're so dangerous by exposing what they're doing.
Wow. Wow, that's just insane. Well, this is a lot of great stuff, and I definitely I want to have you on again, especially as things progress and you begin to learn more information. So let's definitely stay in touch. There's so much here, folks, but look, you've got the power to be able to dig into this stuff and find out more about it. Casey, I always ask my guests on the show, we talked about a lot of different things, but what is the one thing that you want people to take away from our conversation tonight?
Well, it's definitely that people have to step in the gap right now with what's going on with the education institutes and Trump being in office and this move to abolish DEI. We need parents to get into the school districts. I was kicked out of one school district basically for trying to go into a school to document this DEI stuff, flags, whatever. But I suggest that parents get into the schools, contact your local independent journalists, give them pictures, video, and help expunge this stuff from the schools, and let's help save our kids. I think it's time to push, and there's people that are in your community that are hungry to help. So people can always reach out to me. My email address is northidahoexposed@protonmail.com. People can follow me on X, Casey_Whalen. That's WHALEN. I'm on Substack, CaseyWhalen.substack.com, and my video platform is on Rumble, and that's North Idaho Exposed. And thanks for having me on today, Mr. Cain.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you for bringing this information. It's so important, very, very informative and very useful information. I always, look, we've got to do our part, and we absolutely have got to get engaged. So folks, please get engaged. On the other hand, this is a battle against good and evil, bottom line. And it is a spiritual battle as much as it is a physical one. So I always like to end my show in prayer and just, follow after the example that was given to us by our founding fathers. And they understood the need for providence, the need for God's hand in these matters. And so I just want to close in prayer. Heavenly Father, I just thank you, God, for bringing this information to light through Casey, Lord. And I just thank you for all the work that he has done. I pray you would bless his endeavors. And I pray, Lord, that you would please help the American people to wake up and get active, especially parents who have children in these schools. Lord, I pray they would not just abandon their kids to be indoctrinated into these evil ideologies and these doctrines of demons. Lord, I pray that you would wake up the parents, that they would realize what's happening, that they would get involved and they would get activated. And Lord, I pray for the Trump administration that you would help them to root out all of this stuff, whether it's in the DOJ, with this program that's supposedly against hate, which we know it's the exact opposite. Lord, I pray that you would wake up the state legislatures as well, and the governors, Lord, that are conservative, to route this stuff out of the school systems in their states. And Lord, we just pray your blessing over our nation, that you would bring us back together, united under the same cause of liberty and freedom in the American way. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, folks, don't forget to like and subscribe to the show. If you heard the commercials at the very beginning, across the bottom of the screen is the links to where you can go and check out those resources of what that help to benefit this show. So please do take a look at that. And I want to thank you again, Casey, for coming on. And remember, folks, to stay engaged and stay active. Do not allow the enemy to take your children. God bless you, and God bless America. Have a good night.
Raise some Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.